Thank you. Good evening. I hereby call the meeting of the Brockton City Council's Ordinance Committee for Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 at 7:05 to order. The committee consists of Councilor Farwell, Councilor Texera, Councilor Griffin, and myself, so we do have a quorum, and our esteemed clerk, Attorney Resnick. Attorney Resnick, when you get a chance, item number 1, please.
Item number 1, an ordinance to adopt a sharps disposal plan in the city of Brockton. Invited to attend, Jeffrey Thompson, Ward 5 Councilor, Brenda Perez, Brockton Police Chief or her designee, Eno Montesir, Director, Board of Health, George DePina, Chief of Inspections.
Good evening, Councilor Thompson.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Ordinance Committee. Jeff Thompson, Ward 5 City Councilor. Councilors, this ordinance is not yet ripe for debate or consideration for passage. I still have some more work to do, and I would ask that this council postpone this matter to the next Ordinance Committee meeting so I get more time to work on it.
Okay. Councilors?
Motion to postpone to the next Ordinance Committee meeting.
Second.
A motion has been made and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The matter is postponed until the next ordinance meeting.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, Councilor.
Item number 2, ordinance, an ordinance to establish the Immunization revolving fund in accordance with MGL Chapter 44, Section 53E.5, relative to reimbursements and expenditures for the administration of vaccines. Invited to attend, Jack Lally, Ward 6 Councilor, Dr. Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Eno Montesir, Director, Board of Health.
Good evening, Councilor Lally.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councilors. I was just marveling to Chief Nardelli how unique an experience it is to watch a meeting, in the bench. Councilors, this is an ordinance to create a revolving fund for immunizations through the Board of Health. It will allow them to keep the money the state gives them, put it into one fund, retain it, and then use that as a way to get more vaccines for whatever matters they're handling. Here to talk about the financial portion of it is the CFO, Mr. Clarkson, and here to talk about the actual work being done is obviously Dr. Montesir. I was asked about sponsoring this. I felt that it was a reasonable measure, and I'm in support of it, but I will pass over the floor to the folks that have come to speak for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilors, Dr. Montesir did distribute literature just at the beginning of the meeting, so you should have it in front of you. Dr. Montesir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, councilors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight the importance of this revolving account for the City of Brockton Health Department. So allow me to remind you that passing this ordinance represents one of the most significant milestones in the history of the health department. It means saving lives throughout immunization. Most of us, if not all of us, standing here in this chamber this evening are here because of immunization. I am an authentic witness of the fact that vaccine works, and I do know that you know that as well. Throughout the COVID pandemic, we lost 548 lives of our residents. These 548 souls who died had one or two things in common. They were either under-vaccinated, unvaccinated, or fell short with their booster shots. Just in the last 3 months, we have also seen several measles outbreaks, infecting nearly 500 cases, 500 people, over 20 states or jurisdictions in the United States. If you pass this ordinance, here are some of the benefits that we will have. This will be a major win for the residents of Brockton because it will save lives. It will help to save lives. The city through the health department, will be able to administer not just seasonal flu vaccines or COVID vaccines, but various types of vaccines. With a nominal administrative fee, these vaccines will be made available to those who live and work in Brockton. As a city, Brockton is classified in the low compliance rate for vaccines. That includes many of our children, youth, young adults or emerging adults, and older adults. The World Health Organization has this slogan: an ounce of prevention is better than 100 pounds of cure. And I am a firm believer of that. So if and only we could bring back those 548 Brocktonians we lost due to COVID. But unfortunately, we cannot. Nevertheless, moving forward, we can all do a better job in disseminating factual information, giving science-based information to let our residents know that they do not have to die because of lack of access to immunization. Therefore, I respectfully encourage you to pass this ordinance authorizing the opening of a revolving account for the Board of Health to be able to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Any questions, councilors? Councilor Fowler.
Just a quick comment. I spoke with the Chief Financial Officer today about this agenda item. This is not going to be a significant amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I think it's a very good initiative, and when everyone is finished speaking, I would certainly move favorable recommendation.
Councilors, any other questions?
Madam Chair, I don't have any questions, but I also support this initiative, too. I think it's necessary, and we can never have anybody too healthy. So I do support this, Doctor, and I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of it also.
Okay.
Motion to recommend favorably.
We need a second.
Second?
A motion's been made and properly seconded to pass this favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ordinance passes. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, number 3.
Item number 3, an ordinance to establish the inspection revolving fund in accordance with MGL Chapter 44, Section 53E.5, relative to collection of fines and expenditures for the Brockton Building Department. Invited to attend, Winthrop Farwell, Counselor at Large, Dr. Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, James Plouffe, Commissioner of Buildings.
Councilor Fowler?
I spoke with the Chief Financial Officer about this agenda item. It's my understanding, unless things have changed, that he wants to fully discuss this in a bit more detail with Mr. Plouffe, and for that reason, I would move to postpone this to our next meeting to allow the parties to get together and work out any details that need to be resolved.
That's a motion, Councilor?
Motion?
A motion to postpone to the next
Second.
meeting.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to postpone this item to our next meeting. All those in favor? All those opposed? The matter is postponed until our next ordinance meeting. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 4.
Item number 4, ordinance, an ordinance amending the ordinance prohibiting camping on public properties to strike language in Section 8, penalty for violations relative to civil penalties. Invited to attend, Maria T. Tavares, Ward 2 Counselor, Mayor Robert Sullivan or his designee, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor or her designee, Jasmine Bradshare, Director of Social Services, Brian Nardelli, Fire Chief or his designee, Brenda Perez, Police Chief or her designee, George DePina, Chief of Inspectional Services, Patrick Hill, DPW Commissioner, James Plouffe, Commissioner of Buildings.
Good evening, Councilor Thompson. I know that City Solicitor Bridges told us she wouldn't be able to be here, but we do have Attorney Verdi here from the Law Department.
Yes, councilors, and I'll have Attorney Verdi come forward. I have a similar amendment or ordinance on for this evening, so I'll wait until that is read for me to provide my remarks. Attorney Verde, if you wanted to provide anything.
Good evening, Stacy Verdi, Assistant City Solicitor. Solicitor Bridges did send out a letter that she and I drafted regarding the status of the law right now, regarding anti-camping ordinances that are being introduced and passed around the state. For those of you who have not read the letter that was sent out from Solicitor Bridges, basically what happened was in 2022, the Attorney General's office wrote a decision regarding a Situate bylaw that dealt with anti-camping and found that it was unconstitutional. There were a couple bases for that. One was the Eighth Amendment, because there were criminal penalties following civil penalties. The other issue was Statute 40, Section 21D requires specific civil penalties, and the bylaw in Situate did not have those. It was up to $300. And then the last issue that the Attorney General's office raised was the Massachusetts Constitution regarding Article 26, which is a little bit different than the Eighth Amendment, where Article 26 says cruel or unusual punishment, and the Eighth Amendment is cruel and unusual. After the Situate decision, then we got the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Grants Pass, which stated that having criminal penalties, having civil penalties for camping was constitutional under the Eighth Amendment. The court left it open as far as other constitutional issues that may arise. So right now, 2 ordinances have passed, one in Fall River, one in Lowell. They both allow for the provision of no penalties when there is no shelter available. There are civil penalties, there are criminal penalties, but because of that exclusion, they're hoping that it'll pass muster. We have consulted with the Attorney General's office recently, and there is still some concern about Article 26 of the Massachusetts Constitution and whether the civil penalties and criminal penalties would violate the state constitution in those. So that's basically what was in Solicitor Bridges' email in a quick summary.
Thank you very much. I know I received it late this afternoon. I was on the road, so I didn't get a chance to read it, but thank you. I believe the other councilors as well received the email, but it was later this afternoon. So thank you for that summary. Councilors, so, from my understanding, what we were looking to do is to remove the penalty from this ordinance. Councilor Thompson, did you want to?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Attorney Verde.
Yeah. Thank you, Attorney Verde. I appreciate that summary memorandum from Solicitor Bridges. Just on that issue, obviously, some cities have to lead on this issue. Will it be challenged? I'm sure it'll be challenged. But, I think that's a fight that the city of Brockton and other similar situated cities who've passed ordinances, it's one that's going to come to us, and it's one that I think we should prepare for and, and have that debate and argument and fight when that comes down the pipe. I think the residents of the city of Brockton deserve that. But on the ordinances before us, what I would ask is that I believe Councilor Tavares filed 2 ordinances. I would ask that we table those ordinances and move forward on the ordinance that I have submitted this evening. And when we get to that ordinance, I can tell you what we're trying to accomplish, what lessons we've learned through this debate and through the mayor's veto, what his views were on the ordinance, some of the language that he said that we should tighten up, which my ordinance does, and then have a general discussion regarding the civil penalty and whether we want to move forward with keeping that civil penalty intact, reducing it, or removing it altogether. So what I would ask is that this agenda item we table and then move to the ordinance that I proposed.
Just have a question.
Sure, but before that, Attorney Resnick, so we have 3 here in front of us that are from
That's correct. So
Maria
there are
Tavares.
3 ordinances. 2 were sponsored by Councilor Tavares, 1 was sponsored by Councilor Thompson. The 2 by Councilor Tavares, the first one removes civil penalties. The second one removes criminal enforcement. The third one, sponsored by Councilor Thompson, removes civil penalties and then adds in some language on definitions and changes some languages on enforcement departments. So the one that is being heard right now on civil penalties, removing it is also included in Councilor Thompson's ordinance.
Okay, that's fine, councilors. I feel like I have issues with tabling things. I think I've like clean cut because things seems to straggle. Councilors, I know you had a question, Councilor Farwell, but I would rather see the other ordinance and just replace it. I think tabling would be kind of a bit messy.
Okay, well,
Okay. Councilor Farwell, you have the floor.
actually, the question I'm going to ask of both Solicitor Verdi and our legislative counsel references something that we received from the city solicitor. And she writes, currently the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court is deliberating a case that could clarify whether Article 26 of the Massachusetts Constitution offers broader protections to the inhabitants of the Commonwealth than the Eighth Amendment of the United States Constitution. The outcome of this case could significantly impact the enforceability of ordinances such as the one under discussion. So I guess, and I'm not trying to pit both of you against each other because you may come up with a different answer, but in view of the fact that there is a pending case before our Supreme Judicial Court, and however they rule could have a sweeping effect on how cities and towns like Brockton handle this particular issue, would it be better to wait until that decision is issued and then come back here and do what we need to do, because then we would have the guidance of the Supreme Judicial Court? Because whatever we do tonight and whatever we do in a subsequent council meeting may very well be moot, depending upon what the SJC rules. But that's just my opinion, and I would like to hear reaction from both.
Can I comment quickly? My comment is that your current ordinance includes a civil penalty and a criminal penalty. So regardless of what this SJC case might come down with, you may need to make the change regardless.
I'm sorry, you may have to make a change?
Correct. If you wait on this amendment, which takes away the civil penalty, you might have to do it anyways, or maybe you don't have to.
Okay.
You already have an ordinance that has civil penalties and criminal ones that might be in contrast with what the SJC says.
So the SJC case would affect probably whatever we do. And I don't know the facts of the case, so
I'm not too sure how it's going to extend as broadly as it might be suggested.
So that's Raftery versus the State Retirement Board. The oral argument is scheduled for April 9th, so we're talking months until we get a decision on that. And the facts of the case are not dealing with the unhoused population. However, the briefs submitted in the case do bring in the issue of the unhoused population and use that issue regarding how broad protection Article 26 of the Massachusetts Constitution provides. So in this particular situation regarding the Brockton ordinance, because there is a general provision in the Brockton ordinances regarding penalties, that civil penalties, that is, and Brockton has also accepted 21D, which provides for criminal or civil. I don't know if this particular ordinance will be dramatically impacted by the Raftery case because there is a general provision in the Brockton ordinances for civil penalties. So I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Well, it still makes me wonder. What I don't want to do is pass an amendment, then find out, well, we've got to come back and pass another amendment. Then we have to publish that in the newspaper, and then we might have to have a hearing on a subsequent ordinance, and the public gets confused, and they wonder if we know what we're doing. And so that's why I was hoping that we'd have clarification on exactly what we should do, when we should do it, and it would comport with the Massachusetts Constitution and the federal Constitution. But as you say, that it could be months. It might be July before we hear about that April 9th case before the SJC.
And with that said, that is only dealing with the cruel and/or unusual language, whether it's the Eighth Amendment or the Massachusetts Constitution. There was also a case just filed in March out in California regarding a camping ordinance that brought in other amendments. It's in federal court. It was just filed in early March. So we don't know how that's going to play out either in the federal court system. So unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get a definitive answer on this issue.
And just the last comment, what I don't want to do is put our police or any of our enforcement people, whether it's building department, health department, I don't want to put them out in the field and have them taking action and then someone suddenly decides they're going to make a case out of Brockton, and we find ourselves in federal court and we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend the position. And I do agree with Councilor Thompson, some battles are worth fighting, but to put the police in harm's way and to potentially take on litigation because someone decides, again, Brockton has deep pockets and we're going to sue them, it gives me pause. So, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? Any comments?
I have a comment.
Councilor Griffin?
I look at this slightly differently. We owe it to the residents who live in downtown Brockton and the businesses who operate in downtown Brockton to provide them some sanctuary from this invasion that's happening in our downtown. Now, I understand there could be some litigation if we do go forward with this, but I agree with Councilor Thompson. Brockton has to start standing up for itself. We've become a dumping ground for every other city and town that's near us. They send us their homeless people, and the state does not give us one penny to help us fight this problem. So we have to start standing up for ourselves, and more importantly, for the residents of downtown and the businesses in downtown, because the businesses are leaving, and the residents are going to leave. And if we don't start enforcing this, and these are laws, open drug use, public defecation, these are already laws in the books, irregardless of the ordinance. I know some of the stuff is a misdemeanor, would have to be done in presence of an officer, but that's a whole separate category. There's children each and every day walking to and from school, stepping over or on needles, unfortunately, and this is not a way any society should live. And I think it's been far too long that we really haven't realized that we have to prioritize, again, the residents of downtown Brockton who work jobs, pay mortgages, pay rents, businesses who provide jobs and provide services to the city. If we ever want to have a thriving downtown, we're going to have to fight this. Now, again, could there be some litigation down the road? Absolutely. But I think it's a fight worth fighting. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. So, councilors, just my own opinion on this, I feel we need to do something, and that was the reason I supported this from the beginning. And to wait for the state or the federal government to make decisions I'm not in the opinion of that. I feel we need to do our job to support our ordinances, and then if the time comes and we need to bring it back, then the we're here now, this is what we're doing. So I will entertain a motion. I think we can have a motion to send it favorably, but then it can be voted down instead of tabling, I think. Attorney?
You can handle it however you want. I will say that item number 4 is already included in item number 6. So if you were going to remove, the will of the
Correct,
body is
right.
to recommend favorably or unfavorably removal of the fines, you could table 4 and still accomplish that by acting on 6.
So I was just, instead of tabling, I mean, I just feel,
Postpone it until you see how item number 6 develops with the council at full city council, and then it remains available to be on another agenda before the end of this year.
okay, so you feel tabling or postponing was
At least on number 4, because number 4 is already
Correct.
included in number 6.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion to either table or postpone, councilors?
You want to postpone? We'll make a-
Want
Yeah, we'll postpone. I'll make a motion to postpone.
a motion to postpone?
Number,
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and probably seconded to postpone item number 4. All those in favor? It's postponed, so. Item number 5.
Item number 5, ordinance, an ordinance amending the ordinance prohibiting camping on public property to strike Section 8, penalty for violations relative to criminal complaints. Same list of invited attendants.
Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, councilors. Just reading this ordinance, basically seeking the removal of the criminal complaint aspect of this ordinance. I personally would oppose any removal of a complaint for criminal application in this ordinance, and I'd ask that this council either vote unfavorably or table this particular ordinance. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you. Any questions, councilors? No? I'll entertain a motion. All those,
What was the motion?
motion to,
we need a motion to vote on it.
One of you can make a motion to vote to recommend it unfavorably.
Unfavorably back to the,
Yeah, it gets reported as unfavorable.
or you can,
Or
I
you can
think,
postpone, you can table it.
or they can do, send it favorably in the hopes it does not, right?
The way that we do it, because you report,
Right.
we report as either favorable or unfavorable.
Okay.
So you're probably thinking about how motions can't be in the negative.
Right,
This
correct.
isn't for approval.
Okay,
So we're just reporting out favorably or unfavorably.
okay.
so I'll make a motion to postpone.
No, either favorably or unfavorably. Do you want to postpone this item too? There's no,
I don't see why to postpone it.
you want to postpone?
No.
No. Okay, so you
So
can
I'll
make a
draw
motion whether you want it.
And
Send it unfavorable.
unfavorable would mean that the criminal sanctions stay in.
You want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion, please, yeah.
A motion to send this back unfavorably back to the full city council. Is there a second?
Second.
All right,
Motion's-
Just as a point of information, Madam Chair, that means if it's unfavorable, then the criminal penalties remain,
Correct,
Correct.
so there'd be no change.
correct.
Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? The matter returns to the full city council unfavorable. Item number 6.
Item number 6, ordinance, an ordinance amending the ordinance prohibiting camping on public property to amend Section 6, removal process and enforcement, Section 2, definitions, and Section 8, penalty for violations. Same list of invited attendants.
Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, good evening, members of the Ordinance Committee. So as I stated, that throughout this process, it's definitely been a learning experience, but I think ultimately we developed an ordinance that I believe is constitutional and I believe is enforceable, and I think it's in the best interest of the residents and the business owners of Brockton to have an ordinance that can address the issue of unlawful encampments on our public property. Now, just as a side note, the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office is working on a community court. This ordinance, along with other city ordinances, both city ordinances and state statutes that mainly address quality of life issues, will be tackled through the community court, in which a judge and supporting court staff, both probation and other support, will provide additional resources to those who are cited through this particular ordinance. And I think that's just another tool in the toolbox to address really these pressing quality of life issues that the city of Brockton is incurring, like other urban communities throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country. And so during our debates, after the initial approval of the ordinance and then the veto of the ordinance and then again the veto override, the council listened to the feedback from the community, and it seems that the civil penalty was one that really kind of drew a lot of attention from our community, basically asking the question, if somebody's homeless, do they have the financial ability to afford a $200 fine? When I originally proposed this ordinance, I saw the fine as a escalation process where it went from warning to fine to criminal complaint. I thought that was a proper escalation in the enforcement of the ordinance. But again, I said I would listen to the community, listen to my fellow city councilors, and file an amendment that would readdress the issue of the civil penalty. And so my initial position on the civil penalty is that if this council, if this ordinance committee and the council at large deems that the civil penalty is inappropriate, I can support that as long as the criminal complaint remains in effect and that the process of the enforcement of our ordinance would go from a warning first offense, then to a criminal complaint for any subsequent offense after that warning. I think that's acceptable. I also believe that will maybe even help push this process of enforcement along, where the people that are cited by this ordinance will immediately be able to get in front of a judge and potentially seek some treatment, seek some help, or seek the resources from the court that we'll provide to try to get those who are cited by this ordinance really back on their feet and out from any unlawful encampments we have throughout the city. One of the other things that we learned throughout this process, and especially in the mayor's veto, I took heed of what concerns that the mayor's office had with our ordinance, and obviously I didn't agree with a lot of it, but some of it I think I will listen to constructive criticism and try to make this ordinance a better ordinance for the city. And so some of the complaints that the mayor had were definitional complaints of 24-hour notice versus posted notice. At the end of my remarks, I'm going to ask the clerk to summarize what this amendment would do to our existing ordinance, but essentially it'll do three things. One, it will fix some of the definitional issues, or at least make them more prominent and clearly defined so there'd be no confusion as to what these definitions mean. Secondly, as part of our original ordinance, I casted a wider net as to the enforcing agencies on who would be able to enforce this ordinance. Through this amendment, we're narrowing the enforcement agencies to the Brockton Police Department and inspectional services. And then lastly, it would be contemplation of the removal of the civil fine. And so those are the three matters that this new ordinance, or these amendments to the ordinance, will amend. And if Madam Chair, if we could have the clerk maybe provide to the board what, specifically what the amendments are, then we can discuss whether this committee believes them appropriate or not.
Thank you, Counselor. Attorney Resnick.
So we would strike Section 6 of the existing ordinance, removal process and enforcement in its entirety, and inserts in its place, the Brockton Police Department and the Inspectional Service Department shall enforce the provisions of this ordinance. We'd insert the following definition in Section 2 definitions. 24-hour notice means the first written notice of violation of the ordinance as described in the penalty for violation section of this ordinance. The contents of the 24-hour notice shall include the date and time of the campsite, any camping materials, and personal belongings must be removed by, which shall be 24 hours from the date and time of issuance of the notice. We'd strike the following language in Section 8, penalty for violations, which is the civil fines. And we would revise the first sentence of the first paragraph of Section 8, penalty for violation, so that the language states, any person who violates any provision of this ordinance shall be given a written warning for the first offense. And we'd revise the third paragraph of Section 8, penalty for violation, so that the language states, the city shall seek a criminal complaint for any subsequent violation of this ordinance. So the process for enforcement would be written warning through the 24-hour notice, followed by criminal enforcement.
Sure, Councilors, before we move on to questions, I just would like to recognize that we have invited guests that are actually here this evening, so I want to thank them. I know that Commissioner Plouffe was listed as an invited guest on the previous item, so thank you for being here, Commissioner Plouffe. We have Jasmine Bradshaw from the Mayor's Office. She's our Director of Social Services. Fire Chief Brian Nardelli, thank you for being here. And we have Lieutenant Schliemann from the Police Department to represent Police Chief Perez. We have Chief of Inspectional Services, George DePina, here also. So thank you very much for being here. And at any point, if any of you want to speak on the item, please just let me know and approach the podium. Councilors, Councilor Fowler?
Colleagues, you know I voted against this, but I respect democracy, and the council passed it and then overrode the veto. It's been in effect. It made national news. So I guess my question is, what changed? Has anybody seen anything change? After all of what we've done, after all of the media coverage, after all of the comments and questions and everything else, I'd like to ask the lieutenant and Jasmine initially, and maybe the fire chief, because the fire department responds to emergency calls for drug overdoses. I'm not being harsh, but I am being honest. I haven't seen a change.
Well, if I could address that, Counselor.
Well, but could I have the other three first, because they haven't had a chance to talk yet, Counselor.
Yeah, and I'll ask them to come right up, but just to I've been working on this issue for a while, and I've been discussing this matter with both the Brockton Police Department, Social Services, and our District Attorney's Office. I think the biggest reason why we're not seeing change right now is because number one, this issue is not going to be resolved through enforcement alone. And when we do take somebody from the street that's in violation of this ordinance, right now there's really no court set up to address the matter. Our courts don't have the resources, they don't have the judges that have some experience dealing with this issue. And so right now, as we find it, when you bring somebody in who's been cited under this law, that most likely they're in a condition where they're not able to stand before the court because they're either intoxicated, mentally ill. And so a lot of times what the judges do is say, send them to the hospital. If a person is then sent from the court to the hospital, then the arresting officer has to remain with that person until they're in a position where they can come back to the court and seek seek their penalty or stand before the court and go through the adjudication process. And so right now we just don't have a court set up that will address this issue. And so that's why we're working on the community court right now. Once that's up upstanding, and people are then referred to the court for violation of this order. And a lot of other quality of life issues will have the resources set up so that that person can be adjudicated through that court. And so we have an enforcement mechanism. We have a law on the books. I believe it's a good law, but it's not the only way we're going to. It's not the only way we're going to address this matter. It's the law part. Now we need the order part to address the adjudication of penalties, and that is in the process of working its way through. And so we're hoping that court will be up and running by June, July, and then you will see a difference. I know the Brockton Police Department is committed to enforcing this law. I know the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office is committed to prosecuting those who find themselves cited through this law, and not through any jail time or not through any long-term criminal sanction, but through providing resources that they need so that they no longer are encamping on our streets. So I completely understand. I feel as frustrated as you are, Counselor, because I really, I've been fighting this fight, and when you go through a process like this, and at the end of the day, you see no change, it can be frustrating. But I'm not giving up. I know Brockton PD's not giving up. I know the District Attorney's not giving up. We will have that court up and running, and then I believe we'll see the change we're all expecting. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor.
If I...
Jasmine, I know wanted to answer.
Just in response to that, I'm very familiar with how the courts operated. I spent hundreds of hours there. My concern is this was a situation with exigent circumstances. We had to pass an ordinance. We had to do this to rid ourselves of the problem downtown, which I agree with. But I don't see that everything we've done has made a difference. Have we summoned a single person into court for being on public property after they were told to leave that property and they refused to cooperate? One single person, maybe the lieutenant knows. Have we enforced the ordinance that we originally passed at all? That's what I'm trying to find out, because if we can't enforce it, then whatever we do is going to be meaningless. But we have an expert here, and I'm not one of them. So.
Thank you, Jasmine. You have the floor.
Thank you. So I understand everybody's frustration, and I just want to say a few things, because it's very frustrating to hear that people aren't seeing a difference. But it's also coming from people that aren't necessarily on the street with me every day. I am outside of my office every day at some point, and I just want to give a few statistics so that people understand that you might not physically see a difference right away, but there is a difference. So we are going out and making contact with at least 40 people every week, and that is at least, and that is whether it's me with the police, whoever, inspectional services. Since January alone, with the coordination of Father Bills and then some of the people on my own, I have housed over 8 people. And those are people that came directly from the street and went immediately into housing. We have 2 more slotted to be moved into housing on April 15th. We have had 4 people pass away since January 4th because of conditions that could have been avoided, most of which were medical conditions, along with some other concerns. But without this ordinance, since probably around this time last year, between myself, the police, and inspectional services, without having to use punitive measures and without having to use excessive force in any type of way against people, and without having to give punitive measures for them having to survive, we have been able to relocate and remove over 80 tents. Most of those people have either sought shelter, have gone on to other programs, including detoxes, which I have helped get them into, or they've relocated into housing. Some of them are still outside, some of them are in new tents, but we have worked with them to relocate, and at least temporarily, they found other places to go. I'm not going to sit here and say I agree with the ordinance. There are still things that I would like changed. In Atlanta, Georgia, on January 16th of this year, a man was crushed to death by a DPW crew member, unfortunately by a machine. It's unclear whether notice was given or not to them to be removed from their encampment, but I have a lot of concerns for what could happen if we start imposing measures like this, things that might get overlooked, things that might happen if I'm completely removed from any assistance in this ordinance, and that's what it's sounding like to me. These are the people I work with every day. These are the people I have to make sure are safe. It is my ethical and moral responsibility to make sure they have the services they need, and right now this is something that's going to cause them harm. Do I think there are ways to change it to do good? Yes. But without me being able to be included, and on paper be included, I don't have the capacity to necessarily provide those services if things are happening outside the time that I am working or outside the realm of what I'm allowed to do if I don't have any inclusion. People are going to disagree with that. A lot of people don't see the value in a lot of the things I do. But I want to show you guys there are things taking place, there are things happening. One of the properties that attaches to Finnegan Park is currently closing in the additional portion of their property in the coming weeks to ensure that we are able to keep that area clean. We will then be able to cut back more of the branches on the trees. We are hoping to add more lighting, and we are hoping to add more cameras. There are things taking place that people just don't see because they're not always big and in your face. George specifically is with me all the time, has been great as far as when we finally do relocate people, helping clean up. We get clean and liens done if needed, if it's on private property and the property owner prefers that as an option, or we work with them to get it clean themselves. But there are things taking place, and there has been quite a big difference in how things look. I've worked with Tim Carpenter to work with relocating people out of DW Field Park. At least 10 of the tents that were previously occupied are now empty, and we're preparing to get rid of them so that all of that stuff can be moved. Those people have places to go. They are now safe. So while I understand why sometimes it seems like nothing has happened, there has been big change, there has been long-lasting change, and there has been an impact made. And I just want to make sure that people are aware that I have those numbers that I can provide for you at any given time. I have spreadsheets, I have records of every time we go out and what's being done, locations, things like that. I typically keep them to myself for people's safety, but there is change being made. But I also want people to remember this ordinance, without making sure we have all the added details that are in, could have negative impact on people's lives. And at the end of the day, that is what I'm responsible for, and that is going to be my biggest concern.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I misled you.
No, it wasn't anything. I just want to
did
make
not,
sure people know.
Because you know, and we talk all the time about our friend on Grove Street, and you're out there doing everything you have to do. I was more targeting the issue of enforcement. In other words, have we actually...
I can honestly tell you, as far as I'm concerned, none of that has happened.
All right, so...
And it's not really needed.
Here's the other question I have for you, because obviously in January, you will have a new mayor.
Yes.
That new mayor may not have a social services director or human services director. Should the ordinance for enforcement include a representative of the mayor's office, if so designated? Should there be something in here that includes a designee from the, if a mayor so chooses to have that, instead of just limiting it to the building department and the police department? I'm trying to pull out of you what you think we might want to put in here to make it better.
So I don't know who else in the office would be an appropriate person for that. It might have to be a different department. It could be Board of Health, other departments that have the same responsibility to ensure certain care is made to people. I personally believe that whoever comes in needs to understand that this is a city that has a ton of social service issues. Whether it's me or somebody else, someone needs to be in a role similar to this in taking care of people. We are losing money. So federally, they cut a ton of funding from substance use and mental health the other day, and it's going to trickle down very quickly to places like this. We have already had programs closed that provide mental health services. People are already on wait lists just for counseling for over a year, and it's going to be even longer now. People aren't getting services. We are seeing an increase in the number of people needing to be sectioned, but that can't be held in the hospital because they don't have the space. We are seeing an increase in the number of people that are harming themselves or unfortunately ending their own lives. And I think some of the things that are happening while we are trying to find solutions are scaring people. And they tell me on a regular basis when I go out, there has to be a better way to just provide the notice and to work with people through the process. I just still think this needs a lot of work. That's going to be my opinion. I understand something needs to be done. I see people all the time that no matter what we do remain a challenge for us to work with or don't want to work with us at all. I am told to leave them alone on a regular basis. But for the people that do need services and are willing to accept the services, I think we owe them, as well as the rest of the community, putting in the time to make sure this is done right and it's done well so that everyone is best served by this ordinance. And right now, I don't feel like we're doing that.
We ask Chief Nardelli.
Sure, Jasmine, thank you. So I would like to just, before we call up Chief Nardelli, I know I've heard that a number of times, this, what would you suggest? And Jasmine, I know that you said it's not, you would make changes, so you don't have to give them to us tonight, but keep that in mind, like, because this is what we want to hear. Originally, when you sat at the table at the beginning of this, I was under the impression that everybody gave their opinion of what would work. So, you just mentioned it now, so I'd like to know, what do you think would make this ordinance work? And then we can have Chief Nardelli come up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure, so I understand the idea of the 24-hour notice to try to get things addressed as quickly as possible, but when it comes to literal feasibility between DPW and parks, that's not going to happen. If we need them to clear something, if it's something small, it can be taken care of that quickly, but generally it takes us closer to 4 to 5 days to a week to actually get something scheduled on the books for larger campsites, and because things are having time to grow, that's usually what happens. It also gives people the time they need to make sure they get the items out. So if they're given at least 48 hours, I believe that gives them time to gather their items, to also return to the site and even see the posted notices that we give them, or for us to have a discussion with them about why it's happening and what's taking place. So I am sticking to 48 hours, and then whatever happens from there, I understand needs to take place. I believe I should still be allowed to try to make contact with people. If something criminal is taking place, I completely understand addressing it immediately. But if the only problem is the site itself, I think I should be given the due chance to talk to them and let them, kind of get connected to services and have me assist them in that relocation if possible. And again, whoever it might be, whether it's a social services person, if it's pulling someone from somewhere else to try to make contact whenever possible, pulling someone from Board of Health, I just think there should be someone there that's main goal is ensuring that there's service provision and that people are getting the things they need to remain safe, because if not, we're just bouncing people around. They're going from one park to the next without any idea of what to do next, and they're scared and they have nowhere else to go. We are going to probably lose shelter funding in addition to everything else, so we're going to have even less places to be able to send people in the near future. So,
Thank you. Those seem reasonable, but we'll talk about them after. But Chief Nardelli?
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for having me. I obviously don't have the intimate knowledge that the other folks speaking tonight do, whether it be the Inspectional Services Director, George Dupina, or Jasmine, or Lieutenant Schliemann. What I can tell you, though, is our numbers have not changed that drastically at all in regards to outside fires, encampment fires, overdoses, in that matter. We're still going there as much as we were before. I think to Councilor Thompson's point, though, I think we were just contacted today, Deputy Chief Weeks was, from Jeff Smith from the DA's office about that community court. And I think, obviously especially from the fire life safety component on our end, we are going to be involved in that, because that's something that we're deeply concerned about. Just recently, we had a fire behind a business over on a commercial yard that, I actually reached out personally to the MBTA to see if we can get cameras on their property to see, because a lot of times when we arrive, there's no one around. So this is a criminal act that's occurring. We're unable to see those folks when we get there. But we have seen about the same amount of fires this last winter as we did previous winters. We've seen about the same amount of overdoses. Again, our folks are not as involved. We're there as an emergent basis. We're not working with these folks like Jasmine is on a regular basis. But that's really about all I have to say about that. Unfortunately, I wish I had more or better information for you.
Thank you, Chief. Counselor, did you have any questions?
I actually have colleagues, if you would look at this document and look at the statement at the top, the Brockton Police Department and the Inspectional Services Department shall enforce the provisions of this ordinance. I'd like to make an amendment to add in, the mayor may designate other enforcement agents. So give the mayor the flexibility to either have someone on his or her staff or someone else in city government take on this issue, because inspectional services are already busy, police department's already busy. So my motion would be to insert after the word ordinance, the mayor may designate other enforcement agents.
Chair, can I just make a comment on that one? What was in there was already pretty expansive. Included Director of Social Services, Inspectional Services, Fire, Police. It actually included everyone. This change was in a response to the veto letter, which I believe had some input from the Law Department, saying that, in their opinion, it wasn't legal to keep the enforcement agencies broad. So if you'd like to keep it broad, you can just strike the change and it would stay with everyone that's already in there. But the purpose of narrowing it was in response to the veto letter.
I just in response to that, I think, and I'm not speaking for the law department, but enforcement doesn't mean arrest, handcuffs, you go to court. To me, enforcement can mean making people aware of our ordinances, education, outreach, telling people what we expect of them, and then asking them to cooperate. So I don't know why the law department or the mayor would necessarily be concerned with the word enforcement, but just for my colleagues here, I'd like to keep it broad. I'd like as many people involved in this issue as possible, because it's going to take a collective effort, including community-based organizations. And I think to restrict it to the police department and the inspectional service department, I think we might do a disservice to the issue. That's just my opinion.
And just on that, Counselor, so when we talk about the enforcing agencies, we're talking about the ones that actually write the ticket, right? Who make the citation. We're not. This will not limit any fire department or social services to coming on a scene, providing any resources that they have, whether it be helping them seek shelter or other treatment. They're still more than welcome to appear. We're talking about the agencies that actually have the enforcing authority to write the citation, and that's what we're limiting. We're not limiting participation. We're not limiting anybody's ability to provide their expertise and their knowledge or provide resources to those that are being affected by this ordinance. We're just talking about those who actually physically write the ticket.
You want me to read the existing language?
Well,
Yeah,
go
because
ahead.
this is-
I have a question for the
The
council.
existing language says, "The Director of Social Services, Brockton Police Department, Code Enforcement, Fire Department, Parks Commission, and Department of Public Works, or their designees, may be present at the time of removal, enforcement, or to provide resources for individuals affected by the provisions of this ordinance."
So that's already in there.
Okay, and I'm not trying to pass words, but if you limit it to the inspectional service department and the police department to enforce the provisions of this ordinance, does that mean that someone from DPW can't tell someone, you've got to move your encampment, or we're going to come along and pick up your belongings? Would that preclude someone else other than a member of the police department and the inspectional services department from taking the ordinance and going out into the field and actually participating in enforcing the provisions of the ordinance? And I don't know that. I'm not an attorney.
Well, as the language is stated, this does not limit those other additional city agencies or departments from still doing their job, whether it be cleanup services, whether it be providing housing or other health-related services. We still have a procedure on how we deal with these encampments. When we're talking about the enforcement agencies, we're just saying those who have the authority to cite under the ordinance. So that would limit to who would have to come into court, who would have to testify. So it's not putting a Parks Department employee in that situation where they now, if they're called in to be a witness or testify to the citing of the individual, we're not putting those people in that position. Or even Jasmine, the reason we limited this to not include the social services department is because, we understand that the social services should have a different relationship with those who are, the homeless, and, not seen as similar to the Brockton Police Department or the inspectional services, those who had code enforcement experience and authority. So we were trying to limit it, and this was coming from the mayor's office and from the law department. So this is a response to their concerns when we threw that wider net for enforcement. And so this does not limit their ability to provide services or resources, but it does take away their enforcement ability. And I think that will help limit those who may be called into court to ones who have experience in that area, and then also not kind of muddy the waters of the relationship that maybe the fire department, parks department, a social services department have with our homeless. So that was the logic behind this change.
You concur with that? We're not restricting ourselves by...
I don't want to speak for the law department. I did not understand the position from the veto letter on that item because that language included every department and personnel that worked on drafting that ordinance, and everyone seemed to be in agreement that that seemed like a good process.
But would you state that, would I be correct or incorrect in my understanding that we're talking about the ticketing, let's call it the ticketing agents?
No, because Section 6 relates to the removal process and enforcement, right? So enforcement is your ticket, and which presumably you might be getting rid of if this ordinance passes anyways, but let's just say the issuing of the warning and then bringing the criminal charges. But the removal process is addressed in the ordinance as well, which has to do with removal of the campsite. So I understood it to be that the Director of Social Human Services, usually a police officer, there was coordination with the Parks Department, George DePina Inspectional Services for the removal of the campsite.
But that's physical removal. Right.
Is maybe the police aspect of it.
So, I mean, I don't think we're removing the ability for Parks Department, DPW, or Inspectional Services to physically remove the encampment. We're talking about the agency that can actually write the ticket, well, how about this? Can only the police department issue a criminal complaint, or no?
It's that they're usually brought by the law department, or I think.
Okay, so, but a law department officer would not be present. So is that something that is...
There's two different things going on here, right? So you have the removal of the campsite, and then you have the decision to bring the criminal charges. That, I don't think, needs to be in your ordinances, because that's designated by our state laws and what that process looks like.
So who has the 21D authority? Because that's... Well,
I think it generally says like the city.
Anybody. Well, who has that authority?
Like the city.
The city. And so whoever they designate to execute that authority.
Correct. I did not recommend this change to the language, so I'm guessing on these answers.
All right. Then, you know what? Then I withdraw my request to limit this section. I think that might be, I did it in response to the mayor's veto letter. Speaking with legislative counsel, I thought the discussion was who actually had that authority to ticket. But if it's more limiting than that and gums up our process of allowing all city departments to provide their expertise and their resources to this problem, then I prefer a wider net. And so I would be okay with not moving forward with this particular aspect of my ordinance.
So that sentence, we just won't recommend that favorably.
Well,
Make a motion to amend to get
strike
rid of
it.
that language.
Yeah.
All right, then I would make a motion to amend the proposed ordinance by eliminating
Just the language.
the language of the Brockton Police Department and the Inspectional Service Department shall enforce the provisions of this ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion's been made to amend. All those in favor of amending? All those opposed? The amendment passes. Okay. Counselor Thompson, Counselor Powell, did you have any other
No,
questions?
I'm all set.
You're
No.
okay? Counsel? Any other questions? I just have a question, Counselor Thompson. So when Jasmine came up and she mentioned the change to 4 to 5 days and the 48 hours, how do you feel about that? I mean,
I don't know how I feel. I mean, 24-hour notice versus 48-hour notice. I mean, I'm comfortable with it staying at a 24-hour notice. I'll leave that in this board's hands if you believe 48 hours is more appropriate. I think what I'm mainly concerned about is the immediate threat aspect to the ordinance, where if we find that encampment on our public streets, on our sidewalks, underneath our bridges, those can be acted upon more quickly. The 24-hour or potential 48-hour notice applies to those that are not in that immediate threat area, maybe somewhere in DW Park or some other wooded area. Do we want to allow them a little additional time to remove their belongings? Again, I'm comfortable with 24 hours, but you know, I'm not going to throw a fit if this committee decides to change that to 48 hours. Thank you, councilors.
thank you, Counselor.
I'm going to make a motion to, because I'm not the expert and Jasmine is, I'm going to make a motion to change it to 48 hours, wherever it reads 24 hours.
Can we do 24 to 48 hours? That way, what about that, Counselor? That way
Yeah.
we're just as Counselor?
No, the 24-hour notice says, remove your stuff in 24 hours. If it's not there, we're going to remove it. You don't want to say to someone,
24 to 48?
the
depending.
24 to
Okay.
48 hours.
No, I'm saying strike 24.
No, I
Then-
Substitute 48.
Correct. And then you also just want to direct here to further amend the ordinance where it states in the existing ordinances, references to 24 hours shall include 48 hours.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, does,
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Oh, that's a motion.
Again, I think Jasmine has come up with some reasonable,
Okay.
She knows.
yeah, she has no.
She doesn't-
So all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment passes.
Chair, can we hear from the police department? I would love to hear from
Did
the
you want to
police.
talk to?
I just want to hear from the
Sure,
police
Lieutenant Schliemann, councilors have some questions.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. Counselor Texera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Lieutenant, it's a question. Have you seen the difference since we passed the ordinance?
So the answer to that question, sir, is yes. And I'll start by saying we treat everyone with compassion, dignity, caring. Right now, we're out on a huge education campaign, letting folks know that there is a camping ordinance. I can tell you, today, I was out at a campsite with 4 or 5 tents with Jasmine, Inspectional Services, and did some outreach and education with the folks there. They were very receptive. It was a great conversation. They agreed to engage with Jasmine. Of course, every case is different. There was one male living by himself in a tent with a dog, and that dog is his world. So he can't go into the shelter because he doesn't want to give up his dog. I understand that. So it's difficult. Every case is difficult. So there has been a difference. When you help one person, it does feel like Chu replaced them. It's difficult. What Jasmine's doing has to be overwhelming for one person. It's a difficult job. I can give you many examples of enforcement actions. I know, Councilor Farwell, you asked what's changed. Well, what's changed for us is we have a roadmap. There's clarity now. We can tell people what the expectations are of them. It's going to reduce confusion, and it's going to reduce frustration on their part. It's not going to take frustration away. They're frustrated. They don't have a place to live. They're dealing with underlying mental health issues, substance use issues, but those are some things that have changed. About a week and a half ago, we went out and helped a young lady. Her family had taken out a Section 35 for her. That's for someone who has substance use disorder and is not, the court has determined they're not in a position to make decisions for themselves. They're going to call them in for a hearing. So it's a warrant of apprehension. It's not a criminal warrant, it's more of a civil process. But we went out, took her to court, she saw the court clinician. Court clinician felt like she needed to go to a detox and to another facility. However, her medical needs were so great that she was transported into Boston Medical Center. The feedback we got from Boston Medical Center is had she been out in the streets for a couple more days, she would have died. And Jasmine will tell you, we've lost 4 people. That would have been number 5. There is a difference right there. I'll grant you that we weren't out enforcing the camping ordinance with her, something different, but she is one of the folks that was living under the bridges. You would recognize her. What's changed? We went out and cleared out a homeless encampment up at the back of D.W. Fields Park and between D.W. Fields Park and the mall. Clearing that encampment resulted in 6 felony charges against the person living there for what we uncovered when we were there. So while he wasn't charged with the camping ordinance, he was charged with 6 felonies. There's a difference. We're making a difference in neighborhoods. We're prioritizing. That camp we were out of today, the folks were concerned because they were bringing propane tanks out there. We don't want any loss of life. We don't want that. We're here to protect life. That's our number 1 priority. Again, we're out on an education campaign. We're trying to help these people address the underlying issues, and our hope is that when this community court gets up and running, there will be supports. We'll be able to hold them accountable for what we've educated them on and have the supports there to back us up to get them well.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You're good?
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Sorry, you're welcome.
Thank you. No, and just to answer that question, I've noticed a difference. I've received calls from people that said they've noticed a difference. And once again, I think we all knew from the beginning this wasn't 100% perfect, but it gave us something to work with. So I appreciate everything that you said, Lieutenant. Counselor Griffin.
Good evening, Lieutenant. How are you?
Good. You?
Good. I've also heard from residents and business owners that things are improving, so the work you're doing, that you and Jasmine are both doing in inspectional services, is starting to take effect. And I really think once we get the community court engaged in this, we can hopefully get some of these people sectioned and get into the treatment they deserve. But again, I think the whole thing has to keep evolving, and it's not going to happen overnight. This problem didn't manifest itself overnight. It grew over decades, quite frankly. And we still, the real missing piece here is we have dedicated professionals, yourself, Jasmine, the inspectional services. Unfortunately, our state is not giving us enough money to house these people. 40 years ago, they funded institutions that house these people because I think you'd agree with me, sir, that 90% of those people under the bridge are either mentally impaired or have drug addiction problems. And those were institutions that would work with these people. But for whatever reason, 35, 40 years ago, they decided to shut those down and mainstream these people. And unfortunately, we're left with these people living under our bridges with really no resources to help them. So, again, this isn't a knock at anybody here that's trying to work with these people daily. You guys are doing great work. But I just hope someone out there, the state, can get some money coming down here to reopen these institutions, maybe at a regional center somewhere, and preferably not in Brockton. I know there's a former TB hospital down in Hanson with some rehab. That could house a lot of people. It shouldn't be on Brockton all the time. And I just want to close by thanking you again for your efforts, Jasmine for your efforts, and George for your efforts in inspectional services. Things are moving forward. Obviously, I'd like to see them go a little bit faster, but I think once the courts get involved, I think we're going to start seeing exponential changes downtown. So again, thank you very much, Lieutenant.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions, counselors? No? Thank you again. Thank you for being here tonight to work with us on this. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Favorable as amended.
Motion's been made to move the ordinance favorable as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Second.
Second.
I'm sorry?
I was just asking who your second
Oh,
was.
yes, David seconded. So the ordinance moves favorably back to the full city council. Thank you.
Item number 7. Ordinance, an ordinance to reestablish the R5 Senior Residential Community Zone to Section 27-4 designation of zones of the Brockton City Ordinance, and to amend Section 27-27.6 R5 Senior Residential Community. Invited to attend, Jeffrey Thompson, Ward 5 Counselor, Susan DeCastro, Ward 4 Counselor, Philip Griffin, Ward 3 Counselor, Attorney James Burke, Law Office of James M. Burke, Rob May, Director of Economic Planning and Development.
Good evening, Councilor Thompson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, and again, good evening, members of the Ordinance Committee. This matter has been proposed by myself, Councilor Griffin, and Councilor DeCastro, who joins us this evening. This is an effort to create a senior residential base zone that's what I believe is greatly needed in the city of Brockton. It will allow our seniors to age in place, to downsize and remain here in Brockton. And it's alternative housing for a maturing population. And what it does is it reduces the hardships on senior property owners when it relates to maintenance and other things like that. As they get older, they're unable to do in a senior residential development that takes care of their lawn, that shovels their driveway, and provides activities on premises for them to have an enjoyable experience as they grow older, and they can do that right here in Brockton. It's for those who are 55 and older. It will be protected or reasonably protected from traffic. It's going to require at least 5 acres of land for this base zone to be laid down in that area. We will allow for ownership or rental units in this residential community. There should be 30% or no less than 30% of green space provided in the development. And it's also going to provide community space for our seniors, whether those be shuffleboard courts, putting greens, a gazebo. But it'll be a nice internal community where the seniors of Brockton have a place to age in place and remain here in Brockton. I know the demand for this type of senior residential is high, and I know there'll be quality communities, and I know there are a lot of seniors who are crying out for this type of zoning, and so I think it's in the best interest of the city of Brockton to establish or reestablish our senior residential zone, and I ask you to support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilors, do you have a question or questions?
Councilor DeCastro, she's
Yes.
from Ward
Did you want to
4.
speak, Councilor DeCastro?
Attorney Griffin, I'm sorry, Councilor Griffin is listed next in the lineup.
Yeah, he serves on the committee, so it's fine. He can leave his till the end if you'd like to come up. Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Good evening. It's very interesting. Attorney Resnick made me aware tonight. I had understood that this ordinance had been repealed, and so I questioned, why are we amending it if it's been repealed? And she made me aware today that, interestingly, a prior city council repealed the name of the ordinance, but not the ordinance itself. And that's why it remains, something funky happened there, right?
Yeah, so your designations of zones lists out the zones you have in Brockton, and when the R5 was eliminated, it was eliminated from that zone classification, but when you go into your searchable city ordinances, you still have all the R5 language. So what I did was, there was a draft I circulated from the councilors, and I went line by line and compared it to what was existing and created the amendments, and that's why the ordinance reads as it does. So you have R5 language, but not an R5 zone.
Right. And to continue, this was filed by Counselor Thompson, and I wanted to join in on it, but I didn't have a chance to give my comments before it was filed. And so I have a few for you here this evening. Now, you should know I have properties in Ward 4 that I am very interested in having become senior communities. Ward 4 desperately needs over 55 communities. We have so many neighborhoods where wonderful residents are aging in place, their children are gone, perhaps their mortgages are even paid off, and they love remaining in Brockton. It's important to them, yet the opportunity to downsize is not really there. And so I support over 55 communities, and there is one proposed by a developer on Thatcher Street. There's also another one proposed in Ward 5, which is why I was interested in joining with Councilor Thompson on this. I wanted to point out a couple of things for you that were of concern to me. And the first thing is, it's not easy to read. I'm sure you found this out. You kind of have to have a copy of the old ordinance next to you and pick and choose. But let's see, there's conflict. I think Shannon created the document that has the redlining in it. Is that right, Shannon? Showing changes?
I am not sure what you're referring to in terms of a red line. What I do have, counselors, and I can provide it by email, is I have a comparison that I drafted, and I think I provided to Counselor Thompson, of the existing ordinance and the proposed change. So I do have that available. I think what you're referring to might be this.
Yes, that's it.
I did not draft that.
You did not draft this? Okay. So I assume Attorney Burke drafted it? In any event, if it came to me, I request, do you have it? It says at the top, section 27-27.6, R5 senior residential. I request, as I've made a habit of whenever I'm going to ordinance, I request all of the documentation for the proposed ordinances that will be listened to that night. And so I received the ordinance with all of the strikes and this and that I assume Shannon prepared. But then I also received from the clerk's office this other document, and it has some changes written in on it in red and also highlighted.
Do we know where that came from, Attorney Resnick?
No, it was on my desk when I got here tonight.
And it was
Yeah.
in our packets. I'm not sure where it came from either.
Yeah.
So I submitted some proposed amendments as well.
So is this from you, Counselor?
The second, where it has a few,
There's writing in red. It's a little pack, so it's from you. Okay.
So
it's
you're
from
working from
Counselor
three things
Thompson.
tonight. I hope you can keep up.
Probably not.
Okay, so in this document that came with the ordinance in front of us, it talks about, in C1, it talks about apartments not exceeding 4 floors. But that's a conflict with E2, I think it's E2, E3, which talks about 2 stories. Now, 4 floors versus 2 floors probably isn't a big deal for much of the population, but for seniors, it is a big deal because 4 floors probably isn't enough floors to put in an elevator. Elevators are also very expensive and will be more so with the tariffs that everyone's talking about in the media. So I want to suggest, just to make sure, that you're going to go with 2 floors and not 4. All right, so I point that out to you as the first thing. That's a clear conflict, and Mr. May caught it too. I hear him in the distance. So that's the first thing, 2 floors, not 4. And then I also noticed changes in F1 of the original document. It talks about a maximum average of 5 dwelling units per acre of land. Okay, but in the proposal that you received that Attorney Resnick drafted, it switches it to 10 units per acre. 5 dwellings per acre versus 10 units per acre is a big change. It really increases the density. I prefer 5, which is in our existing ordinance, but we can be sporting and might make it 7, but 10 just feels too dense. Remember, these are seniors. They need more space to maneuver. Some have devices that help them walk, walkers and crutches and things like that. And so I think less dense, more dense perhaps than the current ordinance, but less dense than 10 units per acre is preferable. And so I wanted to point that out to you.
Counselor, it was F what? Which one was that?
That was F1 of the existing ordinance.
Of the existing one, okay.
That's right. And the proposed changes include changing that to 10 units per acre from 5, which is doubling the number of units per acre, which is a big change, a lot more units per acre. And then I wanted to point out to you, in the existing ordinance, let's see, where is it? There's a section marked additional physical requirements. And it's G. And G2 talks about development parcel lot coverage, which is density, 35% maximum. And the ordinance that's in front of you tonight wants to change that from 35% maximum to 70% maximum. And that's the amount of coverage of the acreage, which is huge. You're doubling it. Again, we're going to have seniors here. I think if you want to settle somewhere in the middle and be a sport about it, that it might work. But 70% maximum density is too much for what we're talking about. I point that out to you. And finally, and then one other comment. On the second page of the ordinance that's in front of you, under add the following subsection to 27-27.6G, the second paragraph of that talks about slipping in some, on parcels not less than 10 acres, in addition to senior residential housing. It talks about slipping in some additional multifamily residential housing of right, which would only need a special permit granted by the planning board. And I think that paragraph is inappropriate. I think it makes the development too dense. It's kind of opportunistic, putting it in of right. I mean, try for it like you would try for any other development. I think that needs to be deleted, so that a senior residential area remains senior residential area. So those are my comments. We need senior housing all over the city, not just in Ward 4 and Ward 5. So other than these changes, which I propose that you take very seriously, I support this. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Counselor. Any questions?
No, I got a question for Mr. Mayor.
No? No? Thank you, Counselor
Thank you.
Castro.
These are very technical comments. I'm sure most of you identified these issues and concerns already, but these will make a difference in the ultimate product. And it's something we can control as opposed to quality of construction, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Griffin, did you want to speak on it?
Yeah, I just want to comment that I know several Ward 3 residents have approached me about the need for senior housing in Brockton. That's why when Councilor Thompson asked me to join this, I was happy to do it with Councilor Nicastro. I think we owe it to our senior citizens to give them a viable option to age right here in the city that they've lived probably most of their lives. So I support this 100%. Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Counselor. I see Mr. May wanting to approach. Now, we do have, isn't the Skyview senior housing over in Ward 4?
We, Madam Chair, we do have some R5 projects that were developed as senior housing under the old R5 district. However, they were not built to those R5 standards. And
so how does... Do they stay?
Variances, they would stay, non-conforming as they are now. It's a bit serendipity that this is happening today, because I just got back yesterday from moving my mother-in-law to a new assisted living facility and independent living facility in Denver, and I'm kind of tired.
Oh, you could have brought her to Brockton?
Oh, God, no. My mother, maybe. My mother-in-law, no. Put that in the record.
But that's only because you don't want it too close. It has nothing to do with the city.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, all right.
Exactly.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, it's the city's wonderful. It's having
right.
your mother-in-law hanging around you. That's another question. I had there's a little bit of confusion that I'm having, and I apologize I didn't get a chance to reach out to Attorney Resnick. The first 3 pages are an ordinance that was an amendment that was filed. The next 4 pages that are stapled on.
Okay, so the ordinance that has the strike, what that does is it would change the language that's existing
Correct.
to mirror the changes that are proposed in the R5 senior residential that has the red on it. So basically, if you were to approve this ordinance favorably, your final version would look like this, but what's in red are changes that have been proposed after the strike. So you would have to do amendments to add those.
And may I approach to see the strikes, just to make sure I'm looking at the same thing? Here we are. So
Yep.
this is what it would look like after.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, how do you feel about, Councilor Nacastro just brought up a few points. Did you, how do you?
I had
about those?
authored an original draft of this, and I believe Attorney Burke and Councilor Thompson have added some additional things to it, which are quite acceptable. I do concur with the 4-story versus 2-story. We were looking at low-rise development, where we were talking to a couple of different developers, so 4 stories may be too much. And I think that there needs to be some sort of compromise on open space. And the 70% that is in the proposal of development is a bit too much for a senior residential development. But flipping it the other direction, 30 may be too generous. So finding or too onerous. So maybe a 50% compromise might be better. That's up for you all to decide. But there are important things that we get into this ordinance that I think are going to be helpful to seniors. One is that we're bringing into the concept of universal design, and that requires it means something to architects. It doesn't necessarily mean anything to ordinary people like myself, but it means that the doors are wider, that there's automatically grab bars in the bathrooms, that there's reinforcements in the kitchens that make countertops more accessible. And there's a whole series of things that go into the concept of universal design. The other point is dealing with standards that are under the National Association of City Transportation, NACTO, organizations, NACTO, for more pedestrian-friendly streets in these smaller developments that are going to be senior-oriented. It allows for much better mobility for people who are slower walkers or have mobility devices, and these are important new improvements that are going to be made in Brockton. So I think these are very good things.
Thank you. Councilor Griffin.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for you. I'm just looking at this here. It states that there shall be 2 parking spaces for each unit. With senior housing, is that really necessary? I know a lot of seniors have basically 1 vehicle that they're using.
We tend to not see a lot of on-street parking in Brockton. Seniors, there may be a lessening of parking spaces in this maybe 1.5. But remember, we're going to have a lot more staff showing up, taking care of people, grandkids coming over, and with people reluctant to park on streets, you might want to have something off-street.
So you'd be for the 2 spots?
Two may be a bit excessive, but I certainly wouldn't go down to none or 1, but, maybe 1.5.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, you have a lot of pavement.
Thank you, Mr. May. Attorney Burke?
Just one question. Did you already submit the changes?
Yes, so those were submitted after the original, so they would be for amendment.
Okay.
Did you have a,
Yeah, the one thing that I'd forgotten that Councilor Nicastro did bring up earlier is that when I was drafting the original, my thought was that this is truly a seniors over 55 residential community, and that a by right multifamily would allow anybody to develop apartments in these districts for any family who wanted to live there. So I had thought it's best that we keep this as a senior residential or over 55, whatever we decide to call it, and not just allow multifamily by right. Senior multifamily, we talk about 1, 2, and 3, 4 units. That's senior multifamily, that's fine, but just multifamily by itself would allow anybody and their uncle to move in.
so what, we need to do that, so that, was that one of the amendments that, you're going to bring it up? Okay, perfect.
Which, I'm trying to look at the,
I believe Attorney Burke was going to
Discuss that?
mention it. Yes.
okay. And what paragraph was that? I'm sorry. Oh, it's the second to the last paragraph in the amendment. Parcels containing no less than 10 acres, in addition to the previous provisions for for senior residential housing, additional multifamily housing may be developed. So if you have more than 10 acres, I can build a senior complex, but I'm going to also sneak in an apartment complex for everybody.
It can only be 2 floors?
Well, if it stays as the amendment is drafted, that would be a 4-story multifamily building that would be permitted by right in a new senior residential district. And most of these are going to be on the fringe of the city as opposed to near the transit centers.
Okay.
So think Quincy, think Thatcher, Pearl, those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. Attorney Burke?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Ordinance Committee. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Give me an opportunity to talk. I did assist in the drafting of the ordinance, and I'd say it was a participating opportunity for me, because I believe that Mr. May and I met on a couple of occasions and worked in the language. So this isn't my language. This is a bringing up the ordinance that existed up to, I guess, the 2020s. One of the issues is from talking to developers, senior housing is not a moneymaker. That's why you don't see the senior housing projects floating everywhere. In fact, by percentage basis, you go ahead and you build a single-family home, or you build a market rate regular apartment complex, the profit factor is about double what it is for the single-family home private that isn't restricted with the senior housing. That's just a market understanding. So part of the provisions here that may sound onerous are towards moving to get the opportunity for a developer to get involved in participating in the construction of the senior housing. I guess it's a misunderstanding because I represent a developer, a very talented developer, and I think he met with Councilman Castro. He left the meeting clearly understanding that he was interested in putting multifamily housing in, and the comment was, could you put some senior housing in? And his understanding was that there was going to be a mix. One would affect the profitability that would make the affordable usable. So if there's a misunderstanding, certainly, I guess we apologize. But when we drafted this ordinance, we thought that was something that had been discussed with the counselor. But from an economic perspective, I think it's essential that you allow it to continue in the ordinance. If you go and you just put in the language like you did before of a senior housing, you're not going to get any biters. That's the reality. That's the problem. The profitability isn't there for a developer. I think you've created safeguards in the language. By restricting it to 5 acres, there just are not a lot of 5-acre sites that are still sitting around the city of Brockton. I have 2 developers who are ready to go to build them. They're ready to go based on the concept of having a portion identified as market rate housing. But it isn't as of right. It's based on a special permit. I mean, that's what the language says. So it isn't as of right. I think I could understand if you wanted to put some sort of a governor on it that said, when you have at least 10 acres, you could have the market rate housing in addition to, but it says you have to have at least 5 acres. I guess you could put in language that says you couldn't have more private market rate housing than exists from the senior housing in terms of an equation. To answer one of the questions by history, and I've been doing this a little bit, the Skyview was a project that I did. The Skyview is not constructed on any ordinance in the city. I got a variance for that from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that, in fact, is a very different standalone project. That's not part of the original development of the senior housing. After Skyview went in, I thought there was a groundswell within the council that thought that having an ordinance relating to the continuity of senior housing that didn't require the specific hard standards of the zoning variance would be a good idea. I was surprised because I had thought that Councilor and then Mayor from Ward 4 had in fact revoked the ordinance, but it appears that it was just limited to a certain area. I would suggest it's kind of mind-numbing to take 3 different pieces of paper and trying to come up with a document to work on for an adoption. I would ask you to stay with the language in case there's any confusion that Councilor Thompson has given you in terms of moving forward. I think that's succinct. I think it includes the language. There may be some modifications. 1.5 parking is fine. I understand the concept of 4 level units, but maybe it could be 3. Again, the affordability and the ability for a developer to become motivated to get involved in the senior housing is extremely important. Maybe the 70 acres is too expansive for development, but I guarantee you if it's 30 acres, you're not going to get any projects. It's just that simple. And one of the things that we had to modify was there's been a whole market change in the senior housing issue. What's happening now is mom and dad and grandpa and grandma are not selling the house on Brea Circle and moving up to a senior residence that they buy. What the preference is for a lot of them is they sell, they secure a fund of money, which is their safety basket, and they rent. They rent, and what happens is if one of them happens to get ill and pass, they just move. They don't have the problems of ownership and being stuck with a piece of property that Mrs. Smith now has to sell, which is problematic for her, even if she doesn't, especially if she doesn't have kids around to assist her in that process. So rental, again, tells you that the market has changed. There's been a sea change in the senior housing industry. And you have to be mindful of the fact that if it doesn't provide some incentive for developers to do it, you're not going to get it. And I think that's really important. This is not trying to grab something, to throw it in, to wind up with market rate housing. There was apparently a misunderstanding in relation to the Thatcher Street project that could be going. But the reality is, forget about that. I think it's imperative that you include similar language or something in order to motivate the developer to move forward with a project relating to senior housing. So I don't know what else more I can say. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but it's really not a simple project. It's not a simple concept. It's much more challenging than you think at first blush. Thanks.
Any questions, councilors? Councilor Fowler.
You know, I'm learning more about zoning this year than I ever thought I would, could, or should. I kind of liked how we did the overlay at the fairgrounds. Everyone worked together, and then we came up with a final draft, and it is hard to put together 3 different documents. Let's focus on the meat of the matter. Would you support, Councilor Thompson, obviously you'll be the voting member, changing 5 to 7 as far as the language regarding the allowable dwelling units per acre? In other words, instead of 5, we'd go to 7?
So, and that'd be increasing density, or?
That would be decreasing.
Decreasing it. I mean, if the market supports it, yeah. Because, I mean, ultimately, this is about getting senior residential built. But if we want to lessen the density a little bit and it's still attractive to a developer to build under that less dense nature, then I would support it, yes.
All right, and let me focus on the issue of four floors versus 2 floors. If you had a 4-floor apartment building, it would be up to the developer to put in probably an external hydraulic.
No, I think there'd
or-
have to be an elevator.
It wouldn't have to be.
I mean, you could put that language in, that if it's 4 floors, it must have elevators. I mean, that's common sense.
I really think if you're going to have 4 floors.
You're not going to get them climbing 4 floors with bags. It's
No,
just,
I
it's
don't-
not going
I
to
don't
happen.
think so.
It'll
So
never sell.
So if we kept the 4 floors, put in, and the dwelling units shall be
Complex.
The complex would have an elevator.
Absolutely. I mean, Counselor, you understand, you couldn't get anybody to buy the top floors. You couldn't get anybody to rent the top floors.
No, I agree. And if somebody's injured and has to be taken out, you don't want to go down 4 flights
I don't think you have to
stairs.
tell the developer that. I think he understands that, but putting it in is no problem.
All right. Councilor Nicastro and Mr. May, I was just having a discussion about if we kept 4 floors for apartments, we could put in a requirement that an elevator must be installed in the complex. Any problem with that?
An elevator would be required by Massachusetts Building Code.
It would be.
Yes, automatically.
That's what I thought. I thought that over a certain floor. So So we would not have to include that here if we stayed with the 4 floors. Councilor Nicastro, I'm having trouble worrying about 4 floors because we've got high-rise buildings that go up 10 floors.
Well, that's right, and I know too much about elevators from the Campello high-rise, and I know...
And here.
Those, don't go there. I know those 10 stories at the Campello high-rise, that was over $1 million several years ago. And so if we're concerned about the economics of a project, do we really want to be required to have an elevator for seniors for 4 floors, or should we keep it at 2 or even compromise it to 3, is what I'm saying.
All right, well, I mean, I don't, personally, I don't have a problem with 4 floors. I would like to go to the issue of if it's 10 acres, you could have other dwelling units. Attorney Burke, listen, I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old in the house Monday through Friday, and my wife and I love the pandemonium and chasing them around. However, if I were a senior and I wanted to live in a senior development, and we had other housing there with children playing outside and being rambunctious and noisy as they are, that might be very disturbing, or it might be annoying, unfortunately, to some people. Talk to me a little bit about why you think it's so important to just allow that option.
To make it economically viable
and I don't
for a
see,
developer.
I don't see the words "as of right" in here.
No, it isn't as of right. There's a huge difference between special permit and as of right. One developer who I have who's been very successful in the city and is very well received in the planning department because he's done good work, he does what he says he's going to do, and he's very capable. He's always thought that through, because if you allowed that, the senior housing in this specific project he has in mind would be tucked all the way in the back. So it would wind up being a separate area, basically divided. It's like having the houses in front of the project to begin with, so that the market rate would be in the front. You'd wind up with the open space surrounding it and the senior housing all the way back. That's the concept. It's not trying to stuff, something in to irritate seniors like myself going forward.
Okay. All right. Well, councilors, I like the suggestion of Mr. May to reduce from 2 spaces to 1.5 parking spaces. And I take it that's something that all of you could live with. And Councilor Nicastro, you're going to have a project in your ward, I believe. So I give great deference to where you're coming in this. Mr. May, your hand is up first. Go ahead.
Oh, gee, I win. Yes, sir. And yes, I do want to correct my earlier statement. I did misspeak about the regular multifamily development. It is by a special permit. You are correct. But if you read this a little bit more closely, you were just having a conversation about taking it from 10 units per acre down to 7 units per acre. And that is very laudable. However, if you continue to that second to the last paragraph, if you have 10 acres and you want to build, and I don't want to use the word market rate, which is being bantered around here, but I want to use the term not age restricted. So you have age restricted, 55 and over, not age restricted. There's no discussion at all within this document that those are either affordable or market rate. So there theoretically could be new, higher density, market affordable housing built in areas that are traditionally surrounded by R1 single-family home districts. There's also an increase in density if you have, if you're building in that direction. You go from 10, which you've discussed at bringing to 7, now is up to 15 units per acre. And so there's also no discussion of mix between how many senior age-restricted units versus non-age-restricted units. So in theory, if I have a 10-acre lot, I can build 2 age-restricted units, and the rest could all be not age-restricted, could be affordable, could be Section 8, could be whatever. So there's no balance there. There's no mechanism to guide that decision. Not saying that developers are bad and would do that kind of thing, especially not his clients, but there are people in the world who would think that they could get by with saying, oh, I'll give you 2 senior units if you can let me build 40 Section 8.
So, as so often happens with zoning, because it is highly technical, this would apply to the entire city, even though we're talking about a project in Woodford.
Where it's mapped.
To the map, yeah.
Can I comment on that? So this ordinance does not put it on a map anywhere, just so
Correct.
you know. We are just establishing the zone so that it becomes a classification,
Yeah.
the use provisions and development provisions of the zone.
Yeah.
But it is nowhere yet in the city.
Right.
You would have to tell us where that map
But I
change
mean,
would be.
I don't want the public to think we're only talking about Ward 4.
Correct. There is-
Whatever we do.
You could pass all of this and you still don't have anywhere in the city mapped for R5. That's a second step that would need to go through ordinance.
That is correct.
All right, so Attorney Burke and Councilor Nicastro and Councilor Thompson, is there any objection to having you 3 get together with Mr. May and with our legislative counsel and come up with an absolutely clean, ready-to-go, you've heard the comments here, ordinance that we could approve rather than try to work out the language tonight? And
I certainly would be happy to.
I think that's what I wanted to suggest, is maybe putting together a clean, ordinance, and then we can postpone this and come back and take a look at it. Does that, Attorney Resnick?
Always.
Okay,
because it is important to do it right, Madam
correct,
Chair.
I
That's,
agree, right? That's exactly what I was hoping, so,
Then I'd like to make a motion that we...
any other questions,
sorry.
Councilors? No, Councilor, any question?
No, I just want to say I concur with that, too. Maybe 3 of us. 3
I think
together
that would be great.
will be something a little bit.
Okay, perfect.
Be happy to. Thank you.
So I would make a motion to postpone this particular agenda item to the next ordinance committee meeting, to be called by the chair, and with the understanding that Councilor Thompson, Councilor Nicastro, Mr. May, and Attorney Burke will get together with legislative counsel and provide us...
And Councilor Griffin, because he was one of the...
Counselor, my apologies. No offense. And come back to us with a ready-to-go
clean,
document so that we know exactly what we're doing and we have everything down right.
Sounds good.
Second.
We have a motion to postpone, and it was properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The matter's postponed until the next ordinance meeting. Anything else before us this evening?
I'd just like to thank Stacy Verdi for being here
Yes,
tonight. I'm sure she could find other entertainment somewhere else, but thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Attorney Verdi, Attorney Burke, and councilors, and Mr. May. Thank you for being here this evening. Anything else, councilors?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion's been made and properly seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
You thought, yeah, that's...
They're adjourned.